The moment a badge mistakes dignity for weakness, the clock starts ticking toward justice. On an unusually warm spring evening in downtown Washington, D.C., the polished windows of Ashford House reflected the last golden light before sunset, welcoming senators, diplomats, attorneys, and business leaders who gathered there for quiet conversations over dinner. The restaurant had earned its reputation by serving people who valued privacy more than attention, where expensive suits blended into soft piano music, and every table carried the quiet confidence of those accustomed to influence. Among the arriving guests was a woman who drew almost no notice at first. Justice Naomi Carter stepped from a modest black sedan, wearing a simple navy jacket over an ivory blouse, carrying nothing more than a leather handbag and a thin folder she had planned to review after dinner. There was no official motorcade, no security detail surrounding her, and no public announcement of her arrival, because after another exhausting day of reviewing constitutional arguments and preparing opinions that could shape the future of millions of Americans, all she wanted was a peaceful meal before returning home. Her calm expression revealed none of the weight she carried every day, and the hostess, busy with a growing line of reservations, never looked closely enough to recognize one of the nation's highest judicial officers. At nearly the same moment, Officer Daniel Brooks parked his patrol vehicle near the entrance after responding to an unrelated call several blocks away. Tall, confident, and admired by a handful of younger officers who believed experience alone made someone untouchable, Brooks walked with the unmistakable certainty of a man convinced that every public space naturally belonged under his authority. As he scanned the entrance, his attention settled on Naomi. He noticed her plain clothing before anything else. He noticed her quiet confidence. Most of all, he noticed the color of her skin and allowed an assumption to fill every gap where fact should have been. Without asking a single respectful question, he convinced himself she did not belong among the evening's distinguished guests. Inside, conversations continued over candlelit tables while servers carried carefully prepared meals through narrow aisles, unaware that the atmosphere outside was beginning to change. Naomi thanked the hostess with a gentle smile after confirming her reservation, but before she could take another step, Brooks approached with the sharp confidence of someone expecting immediate obedience. Several nearby diners instinctively turned toward the entrance as his voice interrupted the peaceful rhythm of the evening. Naomi stopped, meeting his eyes with remarkable composure. She neither challenged him nor displayed irritation. Instead, she waited, giving him every opportunity to replace assumption with professionalism. He never took it. The hostess hesitated, uncertain whether to intervene. A valet quietly lowered his gaze. One couple paused their conversation entirely, sensing that something deeply uncomfortable was unfolding in front of them. Naomi spoke with measured courtesy, explaining she had a reservation under her own name, but Brooks dismissed the statement before she finished. His confidence grew stronger with every passing second because no one around him questioned his judgment. Then, in one careless decision meant to remove her from the entrance, he escorted her away from the doorway with unnecessary forcefulness that startled everyone watching without depicting lasting harm. Her folder slipped from her hands onto the clean stone walkway, scattering several neatly organized pages across the entrance as a cool evening breeze carried one sheet toward the curb. For a brief moment, the entire block seemed to fall silent. Naomi slowly collected the remaining papers, looked directly at the officer, and spoke in a voice so calm that it almost disappeared beneath the distant traffic. "Officer, by sunrise, you will understand why respect should never depend on recognition." No anger crossed her face. No threat entered her words. Yet something about the certainty in her voice caused even complete strangers to stop breathing for just a second. While somewhere across the street, unnoticed by everyone present, a phone camera continued recording every single moment. Naomi Carter carefully gathered the remaining pages from the sidewalk with the same steady hands that had signed opinions studied in every law school across the country, although not a single person standing outside the restaurant realized it. She brushed a trace of dust from the folder, thanked the young valet who quietly retrieved the final page before the wind carried it farther down the street, and offered him a warm smile that carried neither embarrassment nor resentment. The young man lowered his eyes, clearly troubled by what he had witnessed, but before he could speak, Naomi simply nodded as if reassuring him that his kindness had already been enough. Officer Daniel Brooks watched the exchange with growing confidence, believing he had prevented a disturbance rather than created one. He straightened his uniform, adjusted the badge resting proudly against his chest, and glanced toward the restaurant entrance where several guests had already returned to their conversations. To him, the evening was practically over. Another routine decision, another situation handled. What he could not see was the quiet discomfort spreading across faces that had moments earlier remained silent. A retired teacher sitting near the front window slowly placed her fork on the table, unable to enjoy another bite of dinner. A visiting attorney frowned as he replayed the encounter in his mind. The hostess, Emily Sanders, stood frozen behind her reservation podium, repeatedly reading the elegant script on the reservation list until her eyes widened. There it was, printed clearly beside the evening reservation time. Justice Naomi Carter. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. She looked through the glass toward the sidewalk where Naomi was calmly walking away beneath the soft glow of the streetlights. The realization settled over her like a weight she could not lift. She hurried toward the restaurant manager, Ethan Collins, quietly pointing to the reservation book without saying a word. Ethan read the name once, then again, hoping he had misunderstood. His face lost its color. He immediately searched recent photographs in the company directory that highlighted distinguished guests who occasionally requested additional privacy. The photograph appeared within seconds. The same composed face, the same calm eyes, the same woman who had just been turned away. Ethan slowly lowered the phone, realizing the mistake was already beyond anything a simple apology could erase. Across the street, Naomi entered a small neighborhood cafe instead of calling for another ride. The modest cafe served fresh soup, sandwiches, and coffee to students, nurses, and office workers finishing late shifts. Nobody stared when she entered. Nobody questioned whether she belonged. An elderly waitress welcomed her with an easy smile and asked where she would like to sit. Naomi thanked her and chose a quiet corner table near the window. She ordered a bowl of vegetable soup, sweet tea, and a slice of cornbread. As she waited, she removed a slim notebook from her handbag and calmly reviewed handwritten notes from the day's constitutional arguments, as though the unpleasant encounter outside Ashford House had already become another passing moment in a very long career. Meanwhile, less than 3 miles away, an unnoticed chain of events had already begun moving with quiet precision. A court security coordinator reviewing routine schedules noticed that Justice Carter had not arrived at her expected dinner meeting. A brief call was placed simply to confirm her plans. Naomi answered with her usual calm voice, assuring the coordinator that she was perfectly safe and asking that no unnecessary attention be drawn to the evening. She described the incident without exaggeration, speaking only in verified facts. The coordinator thanked her, ended the call, and remained silent for several seconds before forwarding a factual incident report through official channels. No dramatic language was used. No accusations were added. Only the time, the location, the names that had been confirmed, and the observation that multiple civilian recordings might exist. By the time Officer Brooks resumed his evening patrol, believing the city had already forgotten the encounter, the first quiet wheels of accountability had begun turning with a patience far more powerful than anger ever could be. Officer Daniel Brooks drove through the quiet streets, believing the evening had already faded into memory, his patrol vehicle moving beneath rows of glowing streetlights, while soft reports crackled across the radio with the ordinary rhythm of a city settling into the night. Every mile reinforced the confidence that had followed him throughout his career. Complaints came and went. Witnesses forgot details. Difficult encounters disappeared beneath paperwork. That belief had become part of his identity long before this evening. Several blocks away, however, the atmosphere inside Ashford House had changed completely. Restaurant manager Ethan Collins had closed the reservation book, but he could not pull his eyes away from the name that continued to echo in his thoughts. Justice Naomi Carter. The realization refused to leave him. He gathered the hostess, the valet, and 2 senior staff members in a quiet office near the kitchen. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody searched for excuses. They simply reconstructed every minute of what had happened. Emily Sanders admitted she had recognized the reservation too late. The valet described Naomi's remarkable composure as she collected her papers without blaming anyone. Another employee quietly mentioned seeing at least 3 guests recording the encounter with their phones. Ethan understood that the story was already leaving the building, carried not by rumors but by digital evidence. Meanwhile, Naomi remained in the small neighborhood cafe, where ordinary conversations drifted gently through the room. A group of college students discussed final exams. 2 firefighters laughed over late dinners after finishing their shift. An elderly couple shared homemade pie near the front window. Nobody interrupted Naomi's meal. Nobody questioned whether she belonged. The waitress refilled her glass of sweet tea and smiled warmly. Naomi thanked her by name after reading the handwritten badge on her apron. The waitress seemed surprised that someone would notice such a small detail. Naomi understood that genuine respect was often expressed through ordinary moments rather than grand speeches. She finished her dinner slowly before opening the thin folder once again. Inside were handwritten notes about equal protection, judicial independence, and the responsibility every public servant carried when exercising authority over another citizen. She paused for a moment, quietly reflecting on how easily those principles could be forgotten outside the courtroom. Her phone vibrated softly across the table. The caller was Deputy Marshal Marcus Reed, who oversaw protective coordination for several members of the Supreme Court. His voice remained professional, but concern rested beneath every word. He confirmed that the preliminary incident report had already reached the appropriate offices and asked whether she wished to file an immediate formal complaint. Naomi answered with the same calm certainty she had carried throughout the evening. She explained that the facts should remain exactly as they occurred, without exaggeration, emotion, or assumption. She wanted no special treatment. She wanted the process itself to demonstrate why fairness mattered. Marcus thanked her and promised that every step would follow established procedure. As the call ended, he quietly forwarded the verified information to Internal Affairs and the Judicial Security Division. Each recipient received identical documentation supported by confirmed timelines and available witness information. No conclusions had been reached, but the seriousness of the situation was immediately understood. Back on patrol, Brooks stopped at a convenience store for coffee, exchanging relaxed conversation with another officer who joked about the unusually peaceful shift. Brooks laughed, never imagining that several supervisors had already received notifications containing his name. The city continued moving with its familiar rhythm, traffic lights changing from red to green, buses completing final routes, and office towers slowly going dark against the Washington skyline. Everything appeared ordinary. Yet beneath that ordinary evening, quiet decisions were being made inside offices where facts mattered more than assumptions. Nobody had raised their voice. Nobody had demanded revenge. The truth itself had begun its patient journey, and with every passing minute, sunrise moved closer than Officer Brooks realized. The official notifications continued moving quietly through secure government networks while most of the city prepared for sleep. Inside the Judicial Security Division, no one reacted with panic because professionals rarely did. They reacted with procedure. Every report was verified. Every witness statement was logged. Every available recording was preserved exactly as it had been captured. Deputy Marshal Marcus Reed personally reviewed the timeline for a second time, confirming that Justice Naomi Carter had never identified herself during the encounter and had made no request for special treatment afterward. That detail mattered more than anything else. She had given every opportunity for ordinary respect before anyone ever knew her title. Across town, Internal Affairs Captain James Holloway received the preliminary file just before 10 o'clock. He recognized Officer Daniel Brooks immediately. Brooks had accumulated years of positive performance reviews, yet Holloway also remembered several complaints that had ended without formal discipline because evidence had been incomplete or conflicting. This report felt different. It was supported by independent witnesses, confirmed locations, digital timestamps, and multiple recordings from unrelated bystanders. Holloway quietly requested that every available video be preserved before speaking to anyone involved. At Ashford House, Ethan Collins made a difficult decision. He contacted every employee who had worked that evening and instructed them to prepare honest written statements before leaving for the night. Nobody would speculate. Nobody would defend mistakes. Nobody would assign blame to coworkers. They would simply describe exactly what they saw. Emily Sanders remained at the Hostess station long after the dining room had emptied, replaying the encounter in her mind again and again. She wished she had looked at the reservation list just 1 minute sooner. She wished she had spoken one sentence earlier. She understood now that silence sometimes became its own decision. A few blocks away, Naomi finished the last sip of sweet tea before thanking the cafe staff once more. As she prepared to leave, the elderly waitress gently handed her a small paper bag containing a slice of homemade apple pie. The woman smiled and said it was on the house because everyone deserved something kind after a long day. Naomi accepted the gesture with sincere gratitude, never mentioning who she was. As she stepped outside, the cool night air carried the quiet sounds of distant traffic through the nearly empty streets. She looked toward the Capitol dome glowing against the dark sky and reflected on a lesson she had learned decades earlier as a young attorney. Institutions became stronger not when powerful people demanded respect, but when ordinary citizens received it without having to earn it first. Meanwhile, Officer Brooks completed another routine traffic stop, filed his report, and chatted casually with dispatch before returning to his patrol area. His shift felt almost unusually peaceful. He even considered stopping by his favorite diner before heading home. He had no reason to suspect that his name was now appearing in conversations among supervisors, legal advisors, and judicial security officials who had never met him personally. Shortly before midnight, Captain Holloway finally opened the first civilian recording. The video showed the entrance of Ashford House from across the street with remarkable clarity. There were no dramatic camera movements and no emotional commentary from the person recording. The phone simply captured events exactly as they unfolded. Holloway watched Naomi approach calmly. He watched her speak respectfully. He watched Brooks interrupt before allowing her to finish. Most importantly, he watched how she responded afterward. She remained composed from beginning to end. When the recording ended, Holloway leaned back in silence. He did not need anyone to explain what he had just seen. Facts often spoke more clearly than opinions ever could. He reached for the secure phone on his desk and quietly scheduled a mandatory meeting for first thing in the morning. Outside, the city lights continued glowing beneath the night sky, and somewhere beyond the eastern horizon, the first faint promise of sunrise was already making its slow and inevitable approach. Just after midnight, the secure conference room inside Internal Affairs remained brightly lit while the rest of police headquarters grew unusually quiet. Captain James Holloway sat alone with a legal pad beside him, replaying every available recording one more time. Different camera angles confirmed the same sequence. Different witnesses remembered the same respectful tone in Justice Naomi Carter's voice. Different timestamps matched with remarkable precision. There was no confusion about who had spoken first, who had interrupted, or who had remained calm throughout the encounter. Holloway closed the final video and understood that this investigation would depend not upon opinions, but upon conduct plainly visible to anyone willing to watch. Across the city, Officer Daniel Brooks completed his shift shortly after 1 o'clock in the morning. He returned his patrol vehicle, exchanged casual conversation with fellow officers, and joked that the evening had been one of the easiest shifts in recent memory. Nobody around him had yet received the overnight notifications, and the station carried its usual atmosphere of routine paperwork and quiet conversations before everyone headed home. Brooks signed the final page of his activity log, placed his patrol notebook inside his locker, and drove away believing the next day would begin exactly like every other workday. He never noticed that Captain Holloway had quietly requested his body camera files be preserved before the automatic archive cycle could begin. At the same time, Ethan Collins remained awake inside his office at Ashford House reviewing every written statement submitted by employees. None of them contradicted the others. The consistency disturbed him even more than disagreement would have. Every employee described Justice Carter as courteous, patient, and cooperative. Every statement described Brooks as decisive but unwilling to pause long enough to verify basic information. Ethan finally drafted a formal letter addressed to Justice Carter expressing sincere regret, yet he hesitated before sending it. He understood that apologies carried little value unless accompanied by accountability. Meanwhile, Naomi arrived home shortly before midnight and placed the untouched slice of apple pie in her refrigerator before setting her folder neatly upon her desk. She changed into comfortable clothes, brewed a cup of herbal tea, and spent another hour reviewing constitutional notes for an upcoming conference before quietly closing the file. Her thoughts returned only briefly to the restaurant. She did not dwell upon humiliation or frustration. Instead, she reflected on a principle she had repeated countless times from the bench. Equal justice began long before anyone entered a courtroom. It began in restaurants, schools, sidewalks, offices, and every ordinary interaction where strangers decided whether another human being deserved simple respect. Before turning out the light, she answered one final secure message from Deputy Marshal Marcus Reed. He informed her that all evidence had been preserved and that formal procedures would begin at first light. Naomi replied with only one sentence. She wrote that every person involved should be treated fairly because fairness lost its meaning the moment it belonged only to certain people. Marcus read the message twice before quietly locking his phone. Even after everything that had happened, she had not asked for punishment. She had asked for integrity. As the hours passed, copies of the verified incident report reached additional offices responsible for judicial security, professional standards, and departmental oversight. Each official who opened the file encountered the same straightforward documentation supported by objective evidence rather than speculation. No dramatic language appeared anywhere in the report because none was necessary. Shortly before dawn, Captain Holloway looked through the eastern windows of headquarters as the first faint light spread across the Washington skyline. He knew that within a few hours difficult conversations would begin, careers would be tested, and reputations would depend upon honesty rather than authority. Far across the city, Officer Brooks slept peacefully, completely unaware that while the sun had not yet risen above the horizon, the quiet process Justice Naomi Carter had trusted from the very beginning was already moving steadily toward him with the calm certainty of daylight itself. The first rays of morning sunlight spread across the marble buildings of Washington as government offices awakened with their familiar rhythm, but inside police headquarters the atmosphere felt noticeably different. Captain James Holloway had already assembled every verified document into a single investigation file before most officers had finished their first cup of coffee. The evidence spoke with unusual consistency. Body camera recordings aligned with civilian videos. Witness statements confirmed one another without contradiction. Timestamps matched every reported event. Holloway had spent enough years conducting internal investigations to recognize when facts formed a complete picture on their own. There was nothing sensational hidden inside the file. There was only a series of ordinary decisions that, when viewed together, revealed how quickly assumptions could replace fairness. At precisely 7:30 that morning, Officer Daniel Brooks walked into the station carrying the same quiet confidence he had displayed the night before. He greeted co-workers with casual conversation, collected a fresh cup of coffee, and prepared for another routine shift. The ordinary sounds of keyboards, ringing phones, and morning briefings filled the building. Nothing suggested that within minutes his day would take an unexpected direction. A uniformed supervisor approached him with calm professionalism and asked him to report to Captain Holloway's office before beginning patrol. Brooks nodded without concern. He assumed the meeting involved scheduling or routine paperwork. As he entered the office, he immediately noticed several unfamiliar faces seated around the conference table, including representatives from Internal Affairs and Departmental Legal Counsel. The room remained completely respectful. No voices were raised. No accusations were made. Captain Holloway invited Brooks to take a seat before placing the investigation file gently on the table. He explained that a formal review had begun regarding the previous evening's encounter outside Ashford House, and that departmental policy required Brooks to answer only after being informed of the evidence already collected. Brooks appeared puzzled at first. He confidently described the incident as a standard public interaction that had required quick judgment. Holloway listened without interruption, occasionally writing brief notes while allowing Brooks every opportunity to explain his decisions fully. When Brooks finished speaking, Holloway quietly turned a computer monitor toward him and pressed play. The first civilian recording began. Brooks watched himself approach Naomi Carter. He watched himself interrupt her explanation. He watched her remain calm while he continued speaking. Then a second recording appeared from another angle. Then portions of his own body camera footage followed. Each recording filled another small gap until the entire sequence stood complete. The room remained silent long after the final frame faded from the screen. Brooks slowly shifted in his chair as the confidence he had carried into the meeting began giving way to uncertainty. Holloway finally spoke, not with anger, but with measured disappointment. He explained that the investigation centered not upon the profession or title of the individual involved, but upon whether every citizen received equal treatment regardless of appearance or assumption. Only then did Brooks quietly ask who the woman actually was. Holloway looked directly at him before answering in an even voice. Justice Naomi Carter of the Supreme Court of the United States. The words seemed to settle over the room with unusual weight. Brooks lowered his eyes toward the table, struggling to reconcile the calm woman he had dismissed with the extraordinary responsibility she carried. Yet Holloway immediately reminded everyone present that the most important fact was not her position. Had she been a teacher, a nurse, a cashier, or any other citizen, the standard would have remained exactly the same. Outside the office, the station continued its normal morning routine, unaware that inside one conference room a lesson far larger than any single investigation had begun unfolding, driven not by outrage or revenge, but by the quiet and undeniable power of verified truth. The conference room remained silent long after Captain James Holloway's final words settled over the table. Officer Daniel Brooks stared at the paused image on the monitor, no longer watching the woman outside the restaurant, but watching himself. For the first time since the investigation had begun, he was not evaluating someone else's actions. He was confronting his own. Holloway allowed the silence to remain because experience had taught him that genuine reflection rarely happened in the middle of an argument. It arrived only after excuses had nowhere left to stand. Brooks slowly asked whether Justice Naomi Carter had filed a personal complaint against him. Holloway answered immediately. No, she had not requested special treatment. She had not contacted the media. She had not demanded punishment. She had simply provided an accurate account of the evening and asked that the process remain fair for everyone involved. That answer seemed to surprise Brooks more than the revelation of her position itself. Around the table, the legal advisor quietly explained that the investigation would continue according to established departmental policy. Every officer, regardless of rank or years of service, remained accountable to the same professional standards. The issue before them was not one unfortunate conversation outside a restaurant. It was whether assumptions had replaced objective judgment while exercising public authority. Brooks lowered his eyes again as those words echoed through the room. Across Washington, Ashford House released a carefully prepared public statement acknowledging that an incident had occurred outside the restaurant and confirming the company's full cooperation with the ongoing review. Ethan Collins personally signed the statement before sending individual letters of apology to Justice Naomi Carter and every employee who had been affected by the events of the previous evening. He also announced additional training for managers and staff centered on respectful service, professional communication, and equal treatment for every guest. He understood that trust could not be rebuilt through carefully chosen words alone. It required consistent action. Meanwhile, the recordings captured outside the restaurant quietly spread beyond the original witnesses. The first video appeared on social media without dramatic captions or emotional music. It simply showed exactly what had happened. Thousands of viewers watched the exchange for themselves. Many noticed not only the officer's decisions, but also Naomi's remarkable composure. Comments from across the country reflected a similar observation. People were not asking why she had remained calm, because they recognized the quiet strength required to respond with dignity when assumptions replaced respect. Others reflected upon moments in their own lives when they or someone they loved had been judged before being heard. The conversation gradually expanded beyond one officer or one restaurant into a broader discussion about professionalism, fairness, and the responsibility carried by every public servant. At the Supreme Court, Justice Naomi Carter arrived for work as she always did, greeting security officers, administrative staff, and clerks by name before entering her chambers. She never mentioned the previous evening during the morning conference with her colleagues because another day of constitutional questions awaited their attention. Cases still needed careful study. Opinions still demanded thoughtful reasoning. Public service continued regardless of personal circumstances. Before the first meeting began, Deputy Marshal Marcus Reed quietly informed her that departmental officials had initiated formal administrative proceedings and that the evidence remained fully preserved. Naomi simply thanked him and asked whether everyone involved had been given an opportunity to present their account honestly. Marcus nodded. She smiled gently and returned to reviewing case files without another question. At police headquarters, Captain Holloway signed the next phase of the investigation and placed the completed paperwork into the official record. He understood that consequences would soon follow, but he also knew the greatest lesson had already emerged. Authority could open doors, but character determined what happened after walking through them. And somewhere inside the station, Officer Daniel Brooks finally began to understand that the most important judgment waiting ahead would not come from a courtroom, a headline, or a supervisor. It would come from the simple truth preserved in every quiet second that the cameras had faithfully recorded. By early afternoon, the investigation had moved from quiet review to official action. The department released a brief public statement confirming that Officer Daniel Brooks had been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of internal affairs procedures. The announcement contained no dramatic language and no attempt to influence public opinion. It simply confirmed that established standards would be followed and that every finding would be based upon verified evidence. Inside police headquarters, Brooks sat alone in a small administrative office after surrendering his service badge and department identification in accordance with departmental policy during the review process. The familiar weight that had rested on his uniform every day for years was suddenly gone, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence that no explanation could fill. He stared at the empty space on the table where the badge had been placed only moments earlier. For the first time in his career, authority no longer felt permanent. It felt borrowed. Captain James Holloway entered quietly and took a seat across from him. There was no satisfaction in his expression because accountability was never meant to be celebrated. Holloway explained that professional consequences existed not to destroy careers, but to protect public trust. Every citizen who saw a police uniform deserved confidence that decisions would be guided by facts rather than assumptions. Brooks listened without interrupting. His earlier confidence had disappeared completely. After several moments of silence, he admitted something he had never considered before. He confessed that he had formed an opinion within seconds of seeing Naomi Carter and had never stopped long enough to question whether that opinion deserved to exist. Holloway nodded thoughtfully before replying that the most dangerous assumptions were often the ones people no longer noticed themselves making. Across the city, Justice Naomi Carter concluded another day of court business and quietly prepared to leave her chambers. Before heading home, she received a brief visit from Deputy Marshal Marcus Reed, who informed her that the department had taken preliminary administrative action and that additional review would continue according to policy. Naomi thanked him for the update, but asked for no further details. She reminded him that justice required patience because fairness measured every person by the same process rather than by public pressure. Marcus smiled with quiet respect, realizing once again that her greatest authority came not from the office she held, but from the consistency with which she lived its principles. At Ashford House, Ethan Collins gathered his staff before the evening dinner service. He spoke honestly about the previous night's events and accepted responsibility for the failures that had occurred under his leadership. New training sessions were scheduled immediately, not because regulations demanded them, but because every guest deserved to be welcomed with dignity before anything else. Emily Sanders listened carefully, determined that no future visitor would ever leave wondering whether appearance had mattered more than humanity. Throughout the afternoon, the recordings continued circulating across television broadcasts and online platforms. Legal analysts, former judges, community leaders, and retired law enforcement officials all reached a remarkably similar conclusion. The most memorable part of the incident had not been the officer's mistake. It had been Naomi Carter's extraordinary restraint. She had responded to disrespect without anger, corrected the record without revenge, and trusted institutions to function as they were designed to function. As the sun slowly lowered toward the western horizon, Brooks walked out of headquarters carrying a small cardboard box containing personal belongings from his locker. Several officers quietly watched him leave, not with celebration or ridicule, but with thoughtful silence. They understood that the lesson unfolding before them reached far beyond one individual. Every badge represented authority, but every decision revealed character. And as the evening light stretched across the sidewalks of Washington once again, the city seemed to whisper the same quiet truth that had guided Justice Naomi Carter from the very beginning. Respect that depends upon knowing someone's title is not respect at all. True professionalism begins long before recognition ever arrives. Several weeks passed before the investigation reached its official conclusion, and when the final report was released, it attracted attention not because it contained dramatic accusations, but because it demonstrated how accountability was supposed to work. Internal Affairs concluded that Officer Daniel Brooks had failed to meet the professional standards expected of someone entrusted with public authority, citing verified evidence, witness statements, and recorded interactions rather than speculation or public pressure. The findings emphasized that every individual deserved equal treatment regardless of appearance, background, or perceived social status. The report quickly became part of training discussions throughout the department, reminding officers that the smallest decision made during an ordinary shift could carry consequences far beyond a single moment. Brooks accepted the department's decision with a humility that had been absent on the evening outside the restaurant. During his final administrative meeting, he quietly acknowledged that the investigation had forced him to confront habits of judgment he had never recognized within himself. He admitted that he had mistaken confidence for certainty and authority for wisdom. Captain James Holloway listened carefully before offering one final observation. He explained that the purpose of accountability was never to humiliate someone, but to protect the public's trust while giving individuals the opportunity to become better than their worst decision. Brooks thanked him, understanding that the lesson would remain with him long after the paperwork had been completed. Across Washington, Ashford House reopened each evening with renewed commitment to treating every guest with equal dignity. Employees completed expanded training programs centered upon respectful communication, careful observation, and the importance of never allowing assumptions to replace courtesy. Ethan Collins often reminded new staff members that exceptional service began long before a meal reached the table. It began with recognizing the humanity of every person who walked through the front door. Emily Sanders carried that lesson into every shift, greeting each guest with the same welcoming smile regardless of how they were dressed or who they might be. Justice Naomi Carter never publicly celebrated the outcome of the investigation. She declined interview requests and returned her attention to the work she believed mattered most, carefully studying cases, listening to arguments, and writing opinions that would influence generations yet to come. Those who worked beside her noticed no change in her quiet routine. She still greeted custodians, clerks, security officers, and interns with the same warmth she offered judges and attorneys. To her, dignity had never depended upon titles. It depended upon recognizing the value already present in another human being. Months later, Deputy Marshal Marcus Reed happened to pass the same neighborhood cafe where Naomi had found unexpected kindness on that difficult evening. The elderly waitress still greeted customers with the same gentle smile, never realizing that her simple act of compassion had become one of the most meaningful moments in a story discussed across the country. Reed ordered coffee, thanked her sincerely, and quietly reflected that history was often shaped not only by famous decisions, but also by ordinary people who chose kindness when no reward was expected. As another sunrise painted the marble buildings of the nation's capital with soft golden light, life continued as it always had. New cases entered courtrooms. Police officers reported for duty. Restaurants welcomed evening guests. Strangers crossed paths without knowing each other's stories. Yet somewhere in those ordinary moments lived a lesson far greater than any headline. Imagine meeting someone today without knowing their profession, their accomplishments, or the respect others already held for them. Would your kindness remain exactly the same? That question, more than any investigation or official report, became the true measure of justice. Because a badge may represent authority, a robe may represent the law, and a title may represent achievement, but character is revealed long before any of those things are ever known. And in the end, the quietest truth echoed farther than every headline ever could. The strongest form of justice begins the moment we decide that every person deserves respect before they have to prove who they are.